Imagine the stars falling silent, as the last rebel transmissions fade into nothing but static. No Falcon. No fleet. No hope. Main narration. There exists a forbidden timeline, a shadow whispered only in the darkest corners of the galaxy. A future where Darth Vader did not hesitate, where the rebel fleet was not spared, and where destiny itself cracked under the weight of his power. In this fractured path, the fires of rebellion were extinguished before they could ignite across the stars. Entire worlds bent their knees in silence. The Jedi legacy, fragile and flickering, was snuffed out before it could awaken. And the galaxy learned what it truly meant to live without hope. This is not the story, you know. This is not the saga sung by survivors or passed down as legend. This is the tale that was buried, the one too dangerous to tell, a vision of what might have been, had Vader destroyed the rebel fleet. Tonight, we unseal that secret. We step into the shadows of a history that was never meant to exist. And we ask, what if? Picture this, the rebel fleet, gathered in one desperate stand, ready to challenge the Empire against all odds. Ships from across the galaxy have risked everything to face the Emperor's war machine. It's a fragile alliance, X-Wings, Mon Calamari cruisers, Corellian frigates, united by the smallest thread of hope. Now, imagine Darth Vader seizing that exact moment to strike, not with hesitation or failure, but with ruthless precision. If the Dark Lord had destroyed the rebel fleet in one decisive blow, the entire Star Wars story would pivot on that single event. This what-if scenario isn't just about one battle going differently, it's about the collapse of hope itself. Star Wars has always been fueled by the idea that a small group of rebels could stand against impossible odds. But if Vader had wiped them out, what happens when the symbol of rebellion, the very heartbeat of resistance, goes silent? The turning point here isn't only military. It's psychological. With one swift victory, the Empire would have transformed the galaxy's perception of rebellion from possible to hopeless. Let's consider the tactics. Vader was more than just a Sith Lord with a lightsaber, he was a brilliant military strategist. In canon, his flaw wasn't capability, but conflict. He often held back, torn between duty to the Emperor and his personal obsession with Luke Skywalker. Remove that hesitation, and suddenly you have the Empire's most dangerous weapon unleashed in full force. Imagine a scenario where Vader doesn't prioritize capturing Luke at Endor but instead focuses purely on annihilation. The rebel fleet, surrounded and outnumbered, would be systematically dismantled. Mon Calamari capital ships, gone. The Millennium Falcon, reduced to debris. The ragtag resistance would end in fire before it ever had the chance to spark hope across the galaxy. But here's where things get even more interesting. This decisive strike wouldn't just end the rebellion, it would redefine Vader's role in the Star Wars universe. Instead of the conflicted father pulled between light and dark, we'd see the Vader that Palpatine always envisioned, an unstoppable enforcer of Sith dominance. With the rebellion crushed, Vader's loyalty to the Emperor might seem absolute, but would it? Or would such an overwhelming victory make him realize the Empire doesn't need two masters of the dark side? This scenario sets the stage for a galaxy where Vader's ambition could grow unchecked. And think about how differently fans would view Vader. In the original timeline, he's redeemed by Luke and remembered as a tragic figure who returned to the light in his final moments. But in this alternate path, he becomes something darker, a symbol not of redemption, but of total domination. Star Wars would no longer be a story of hope surviving against all odds, it would become a cautionary tale of what happens when fear and power crush resistance before it can take root. So, what happens next? How does the Empire use this crushing victory to reshape the galaxy? That's where we dive deeper. If Darth Vader had annihilated the rebel fleet, the Empire's response wouldn't have been subtle, it would have been absolute. For years, the rebellion acted like a thorn in the Emperor's side, poking holes in Imperial control, spreading whispers of resistance, and inspiring planets to rise against tyranny. But if that fleet, the backbone of the movement, were reduced to space dust, the galaxy would witness a chilling truth. no one could stand against the Empire. Fear, already the Empire's greatest weapon, would cement itself as unbreakable law. Think about the message this victory would send. The Empire didn't just win a battle, it obliterated the only credible opposition. Every planetary system weighing whether to support the rebellion or stay neutral would suddenly fall silent. Why risk everything when the supposed guardians of hope have been erased in one brutal strike? Whole sectors that once provided secret aid to fuel, weapons, safe harbors, would instantly withdraw. The Empire's propaganda machine would seize this moment, broadcasting the destruction across star systems. Holograms of burning cruisers and shattered X-wings would loop endlessly, hammering home the message: resistance is futile. From a strategic perspective, Palpatine would waste no time. The Imperial Navy, no longer distracted by rebel raids, could shift focus toward securing the Outer Rim. Trade routes would fall under heavier surveillance. Worlds like Lothal, Ryloth, and even Cloud City would find themselves locked down with stricter garrisons. The Senate was already gone by this point in canon, but this victory would remove any lingering doubts among governors or moffs who might secretly question Palpatine's rule. His grip would tighten not only militarily, but politically. Fear of retribution would outweigh even the thought of defiance. And then there's the Death Star factor. Imagine the psychological blow of losing the fleet, followed by the Empire unveiling another planet killer, rebuilt faster and stronger without the constant harassment of rebel sabotage. Without the rebellion, there's no trench run, no heroic destruction of superweapons, just a galaxy forced to watch as one world after another falls in line or is erased from the stars. Instead of a symbol of imperial arrogance, the Death Star becomes the final nail in the coffin of resistance. But here's where it gets even more chilling. With the rebellion gone, the Jedi legacy dies in silence. Luke Skywalker, if he even survived the battle, would be hunted relentlessly. Leia, stripped of allies and fleets, would be reduced to nothing more than a fugitive. And without these figures inspiring the galaxy, the Empire wouldn't just control through military might, it would control the narrative. They could rewrite history itself, painting the Jedi as terrorists and themselves as the eternal bringers of peace. So the big question becomes, what happens to Luke, Leia, and the fragile spark of the Jedi? Can individuals still rise when the rebellion has been snuffed out? If the rebel fleet had been destroyed, the immediate fallout for Luke and Leia would be catastrophic. Both of them represented more than just leaders, they were living symbols. Luke was the Jedi reborn, the embodiment of ancient hope returned in a galaxy suffocating under darkness. Leia was the voice of resistance, uniting fractured star systems under one banner. But with the fleet gone, their positions would shift overnight from icons of defiance to fugitives scrambling for survival. Let's start with Luke. In canon, Luke's journey is driven by victories, however small. Destroying the Death Star gave him confidence. Training with Yoda gave him purpose. And ultimately, his faith in his father gave him redemption. But in this alternate timeline, imagine Luke watching the fleet burn. Every ally he trusted, gone. Every ship he fought alongside, reduced to wreckage. His sense of purpose would shatter. Instead of a Jedi in training, he becomes a hunted target with nowhere to turn. And worse, Vader wouldn't just want to capture him, he'd want to crush him. With Luke's friends dead and his fleet annihilated, Vader could press his advantage, using psychological warfare to convince Luke that resistance is meaningless. Would Luke's willpower hold up without hope backing him? Or would he be seduced by the dark side faster, desperate for power to avenge the fallen? Leia's situation would be equally dire. Without the fleet, the political foundation of the rebellion disappears. She no longer has Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, or the Mon Calamari Navy to rally. It's just her, an orphaned leader with no resources, no army, and no safety net. And while Leia is resilient, even she couldn't sustain a galactic movement on her own. The Empire would brand her the last terrorist, a criminal responsible for the deaths of millions. Her capture would be inevitable, and Palpatine would relish parading her as proof that defiance leads only to ruin. But here's the most tragic consequence: the Jedi legacy itself. Yoda and Obi-Wan pinned everything on Luke and Leia to carry forward the light. If they fall, the Jedi Order truly ends. No new generation, no revival, no spark left to guide the galaxy out of darkness. The stories of the Jedi would fade into myth, twisted by Imperial propaganda. Instead of inspiring children across the galaxy to believe in the Force, they'd grow up fearing it, taught only that Jedi were dangerous traitors who threatened peace. This isn't just about individuals, it's about legacy. In canon, Luke and Leia's survival ensures that Hope survives too. But in this alternate timeline, the destruction of the fleet erases their support, isolates them, and leaves them vulnerable to Vader's relentless pursuit. Without allies, without momentum, the Skywalker twins' role shifts from saviors to survivors. And that raises an even bigger question: if Luke and Leia are silenced, who fills the power vacuum? How do other factions, criminal syndicates, planetary leaders, or even opportunistic Imperials respond to this new galactic order? The destruction of the Rebel fleet wouldn't just impact Luke, Leia, and the Jedi, it would send shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. Star Wars isn't just about the Empire versus the Rebellion. Beneath that central conflict lies a complex web of factions, smugglers, crime syndicates, planetary governments, and even disloyal Imperials. With the rebels gone, each of these groups would scramble to reposition themselves in a galaxy where the Empire stands unchallenged. First, let's look at the underworld. Crime syndicates like the Hutts and the Black Sun thrived in the cracks of Imperial control, exploiting the distraction caused by rebel raids and spreading influence in systems the Empire couldn't fully secure. But with Vader's decisive victory, those cracks close fast. The Empire no longer has to divert resources chasing rebel cells. Instead, it can focus on strangling organized crime and taking over smuggling routes. That means groups like Jabba's empire on Tatooine would either bow to Imperial dominance or be crushed. Han Solo, in this scenario, wouldn't be a freewheeling rogue, he'd be cornered, forced to choose between servitude under crime bosses or capture by the Empire. Then there are the planetary leaders. In canon, the survival of the rebellion gave neutral systems a reason to hedge their bets, quietly supporting the cause while maintaining plausible deniability. But in this alternate reality, that safety net evaporates. Worlds like Chandrila, Alderaan's surviving allies, or even Bespin, would face an ultimatum: surrender and pledge loyalty, or risk being erased. And without the possibility of rebel reinforcements, most systems would fold immediately. Independence would vanish, replaced by an even more centralized Imperial regime. Even within the Empire itself, the destruction of the fleet would spark shifts. The Imperial hierarchy was never free of infighting. Moffs, admirals, and bureaucrats often vied for Palpatine's favor, balancing their fear of Vader with their hunger for power. A crushing victory like this would elevate Vader's reputation beyond measure. He wouldn't just be the Emperor's enforcer, he'd be the face of Imperial supremacy. Ambitious Imperials might see Vader as the real center of power, sowing seeds of paranoia in Palpatine. Could this fracture the Sith master-apprentice dynamic sooner? Possibly. With no rebellion to fight, Vader's ambition would have fewer distractions, and his eyes might turn toward claiming the throne himself. Finally, let's not forget the galaxy's common people. Ordinary citizens who once whispered about rebel heroes would instead live in silence. Smugglers would tighten their operations. Farmers, miners, and workers would fall deeper under Imperial exploitation, knowing there was no one left to stand for them. Hope wouldn't just dim, it would be outlawed. All of this builds to the ultimate question: if the Empire reigns unchallenged, how does that reshape the Star Wars saga itself? What kind of galaxy do we end up with when one moment of total victory changes everything that follows? Here's where the what if becomes more than just a twist, it becomes a full rewrite of Star Wars as we know it. If Vader had destroyed the Rebel fleet, the ripple effects would extend far beyond a single battle. This wouldn't just alter the outcome of one war, it would transform the themes, the legacy, and the entire mythos of Star Wars itself. First, the core theme of hope against impossible odds would vanish. Star Wars has always been a story about the few standing up to the many, the farmers, smugglers, and outcasts, proving that even empires can fall. But in this timeline, the lesson is brutally different. No matter how brave, no matter how united, resistance can be crushed in an instant. The saga becomes a darker tale, one where fear triumphs, and destiny bends under the weight of power. Instead of inspiring generations to believe in courage, it becomes a warning about unchecked authority. From a storytelling standpoint, the saga would pivot into something closer to a tragedy. Luke's arc, once a beacon of growth and redemption, could spiral into despair or corruption. Maybe he joins Vader, not out of choice but out of survival. Imagine a timeline where the father-son bond forms not through Luke saving Vader, but Vader pulling Luke into the shadows. That would cement the Sith's dominance and create a new, terrifying dynasty. Instead of Return of the Jedi, the galaxy witnesses the rise of a Skywalker empire. Leia's fate in this altered saga would be equally impactful. In canon, she becomes a leader of hope, a figure who carries the torch forward even after great losses. But here, stripped of allies and armies, she may face a far bleaker future, imprisoned, executed, or used as a tool of propaganda. Imagine the Empire parading Leia across the galaxy as the last rebel princess, humiliated as proof that defiance is futile. Her spark of resistance extinguished would symbolize the final death of rebellion. But the ripple effect doesn't stop with the Skywalkers. Entire plotlines we know and love collapse. There's no Battle of Endor, no Ewok victory, no redemption arc. Han Solo likely dies in obscurity, Chewbacca enslaved, Lando erased. Planets like Coruscant, Naboo, and Tatooine remain in the iron grip of Imperial oppression. And future generations? They grow up never knowing heroes. The Force, instead of being balanced, is consumed by darkness, leaving the galaxy with only fear to guide it. From the fan perspective, this alternate saga would force us to ask uncomfortable questions. Would Star Wars still resonate if it ended in despair? Would Vader still be remembered as iconic if he never turned back? Or does the saga's enduring power come specifically from the light breaking through, no matter how small? That's the beauty of these what-if explorations. They remind us why the original story matters so much. Because hope isn't guaranteed. In another reality, it could have been snuffed out entirely. And in imagining that darker possibility, we see even more clearly why hope, however fragile, is worth fighting for.